Ever think about the chips in your phone as like weapons? Not in a sci-fi way, but like actual tools of global power. Because that's where we're going in this deep dive.
It's true, they're at the heart of Cold War strategy, economic dominance.
Yeah, and that's just scratching the surface.
We're diving into Chris Miller's chip war to really get into how these tiny components became so central to, well, everything.
And it's not just a history lesson, right? This book is like a backstage pass with crazy stories and insights you wouldn't believe.
Absolutely. What makes it so fascinating is the access Miller had. Government archives, interviews with actual tech titans. He pieced together a story wilder than most spy thrillers.
Speaking of wild, you'll never guess how fragile those early computers were. Imagine 18,000 vacuum tubes, which is like what one modern chip does, and they were constantly breaking down.
Oh, absolutely. It's a completely different world than what we're used to today.
Imagine like a moth flies too close and suddenly your whole calculation is toast.
That's basically how the ENIAC, one of the very first computers, operated. Forget Wi-Fi troubles. These things were practically held together by luck.
So when they invented the transistor, it wasn't just make it smaller, it was make it work at all. Yeah.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
transistor changed the game completely. It ushered in the era of binary code, the language of computers as we know it.
Instead of like clunky gears and levers, it was all about electrical signals.
It seems so simple now, just ones and zeros. But that shift is why you're listening to this right now.
Whoa, when you put it that way, my entire digital life, streaming this, whatever I post online, it's all just ones and zeros on a tiny chip.
Absolutely. And as the technology itself advanced, so did what was at stake. We're talking the 1960s, Cold War in full swing.
And suddenly those ones and zeros are controlling missiles, powering the space race. It's crazy.
Right, and that's where a company called Fairchild Semiconductor comes in.
Basically, they were NASA's tech supplier, the ones providing the chips that got us to the moon.
Their impact was massive. But here's the thing. Fairchild's real legacy wasn't just about space exploration. It was about making computing accessible.
Right. They figured out how to mass produce these chips so they weren't just for like governments and universities anymore.
Exactly. They made them affordable, available to everyone. But in doing so, they set the stage for a whole new kind of competition.
And I bet nobody saw it coming.
To keep costs down, Fairchild embraced overseas labor, particularly in Asia. They had no idea they were nurturing the region that would become their biggest rival.
So we went from like moth-infested computers to mass production. But how would we get from there to like chips being this whole global power struggle thing?
Oh, fast forward to the 1980s, and there's this new player on the scene, Japan. They were pumping out chips like crazy, especially these memory chips called DRAM. Became a real force.
Well, hold on. If they were so far ahead with memory, why weren't they the ones making all the PCs, all the computers everyone was using?
It's ironic, actually. Their focus on DRAM, it kind of worked against them in the long run. They missed the boat on a different kind of chip, the microprocessor.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
The brains of the operation, not just the memory bank.
Precisely. That's where a guy named Morris Chang comes in. Real visionary engineer. He realized the future wasn't about doing it all yourself, but specialization. So he starts TSMC, a company that would make chips, but chips designed by other companies.
Kind of like you don't need to be the master chef. You just need to own the best kitchen in the world.
Perfect analogy. And it really shook things up. This foundry model, it meant companies like, say, Qualcomm or NVIDIA, they could focus on designing the most cutting-edge chips without the headache of building factories.
It seems like every few years, tech goes through these huge shifts. So when everyone started saying software is king, did hardware just, like, not matter anymore?
Not at all. Software is crucial, don't get me wrong, but it's the hardware, those chips, that dictate what software can actually do.
Like saying the script is the most important part of a movie, yeah, it's key, but try watching it without cameras, actors, a screen.
Exactly. And nobody got this better than Apple. Steve Jobs, he understood that to make truly amazing devices, you needed to control both, hardware and software. That's when Apple started making their own chips, tailored for their iPhones, their iPads.
And suddenly those things weren't just pretty to look at, they were crazy powerful too, blew the competition away.
It changed everything. Apple proved that custom-designed silicon, it was the key to this seamless, powerful user experience. They weren't messing around.
They became a chip powerhouse, just like that. Proves the real battle for tech, it's happening at the tiniest level. And speaking of battles, we got to talk about the elephant, or maybe the dragon in the room, China. They want in on this chip game, and they're not being subtle about it.
No doubt about it. China's ambitions in this industry, they've really upped the ante. It's not just about, like, who's got the best economy anymore. It's about who controls the foundation of what's next,
Yeah.
you know?
Right, we're talking AI, we're talking advanced weapons systems, all running on these chips. It's like the new arms race, but instead of nukes, it's
It's
nanometers.
a good analogy.
Yeah.
And just like back in the Cold War, this chip war, it's global. Alliances, embargoes, you name it.
You mentioned EUV machines before, and I gotta say, I'd never even heard of these things, but they're essential for making the most advanced chips, right? So what's the deal there?
Well, the company that makes them, ASML, they're based in the Netherlands. And the U.S. has been putting massive pressure on them, basically saying, don't even think about selling those to China. Huge point of contention.
So it's like, control the tools, you control the tech, you control the future. Kind of scary when you put it that way.
It's a powerful leverage point, no doubt. China's pouring money into catching up, but there are some serious roadblocks, and that EUV thing is a perfect example.
This has been a wild ride, honestly. But like,
Yeah.
what does it all mean for regular people?
It means that tech we use every day, phones, laptops, even cars now, it's all caught up in this power struggle.
So that fancy new phone, it's not just a status symbol, it's a pawn in some high-stakes game.
You could say that, but Miller's book, it gets me thinking about another angle, something I hadn't really considered. What if the future of this whole chip war? It's not just nations going head-to-head. What if it's companies becoming these chip superpowers in their own right?
You mean like Apple's already doing their own chips, right? What if they start actually manufacturing them too?
Exactly. Imagine Apple, Tesla, some tech giant, not just designing, but controlling the whole process,
Yeah.
from raw silicon to the software running on it.
That's kind of mind-blowing, the influence they'd have.
It will be huge. It reminds us that this chip war, it's not static. New players, new battlefield, it's all changing constantly.
This deep dive has been a serious eye-opener. Made me realize those tiny chips, the ones we never think about, they're shaping our future in ways we're just starting to grasp.
It's complex, it's moving fast, but by understanding what's going on, we're more informed, right? And that's got to count for something.
I'm with you on that. So next time you pick up your phone, think about this. Could the company that made it one day control the very heart of tech, maybe even surpass nations in terms of power? It's a question worth asking. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you on the next one.